I very much recommend this book, but you need to have the right expectations, you need to be in the right headspace. I can promise you that you will be uncomfortable reading this, but I can also promise you that this is going to make you think. This book is not a romance, this is a psychological fiction. I want to tell you how I annotated this book. I had no idea what grooming really meant and how it distorts the vision and the true meaning of consent. I have been reading a lot of romance lately, which is fantastic, but I needed to mix things up. I was in the mood for something dark. So why not read a book that has dark in the title, like My Dark Vanessa? I mean, darkness is pretty much guaranteed with this one. If you are looking for an age gap romance, if you are looking for a dark romance, if you are looking for an uplifting book about strength out of tragedy, My Dark Vanessa is not the book you're looking for. I'm not here to kink shame anyone. I mean, we're all adults here. Well, hopefully we're all adults here, especially for this particular book review. But firstly, pedophilia is not a kink. And secondly, this book is not a romance. This is a psychological fiction. This is a look at psychology, sociology, abuse, and mental health. More specifically, this book is about Vanessa, who is 15 years old and going to boarding school. We alternate chapters from her time at the boarding school and also as an adult when she's 32. She enters a relationship with her 42-year-old English professor. Again, this is not a romance book. This is about grooming, how he influenced her to think that she was consenting to this sexual relationship. Through the grooming, it also makes you really question consent. This is about gaslighting, how Jacob Strain twisted things around to make her feel like she came onto him and like everything was her fault. This book is really about the psychology behind abuse. I did not pick this book up for entertainment or to escape real life. I picked up this book for the unfiltered honesty. I really wanted to know, how do these things happen? What goes through these people's heads? This book is really about two very mentally sick people. Obviously you have the teacher and you could assume you know why he is sick and twisted for going after an underage girl. But you also have Vanessa, the student, and she throughout the book does not view herself as a victim. She thinks she wanted this relationship and it was consensual. She thinks there was no abuse involved, and so she has her own elements of mental illness that I think contributed to her feeling this way. When Vanessa first came to this boarding school, she felt very much like an outcast. She didn't have many friends. She felt just very different from everyone. And this is really what made her a great target for this predator. I tried not to watch too many reaction videos on this book, and I tried not to read too many reviews just because I didn't want it to sway my opinion of the book. I read and watched just enough to get my expectations before going into this because I knew it was a very heavy topic. But there was one review that really perfectly sums up how I feel about this. This reviewer said that My Dark Vanessa makes you open your eyes and want to shut them all within the same sentence. Before I get into my annotations and also my reactions to this book, I did want to highlight that after I purchased it and I was looking up some of the additional reviews on it, I came across an interesting controversy. So Oprah was considering highlighting this book for her book club, but at the last minute pulled out of that deal. There was another author highlighting that she had a very similar story to My Dark Vanessa, but wasn't getting nearly the same amount of publicity or publisher support. It wasn't necessarily an accusation of plagiarism, but it was really an examination of how publishers and companies are more likely to support white authors than authors of color. I think that's very interesting, and I wish I was a little bit more informed of that before I picked up this book. That's why I wanted to mention it here, because I think that's something that we need to be aware of. What books are being pushed on us? Very high level, I want to tell you how I annotated this book, and then I'm going to switch gears and dive into the topics a little bit more closely. But since that might have a little bit of spoilers for those that like to go into books completely blind, I want to keep it just high level summary at first. I mentioned this book is about grooming, manipulation, gaslighting as a form of abuse. And so the first color that I marked was purple, which indicated manipulation. Spoiler alert, I actually ran out of purple tabs because there was so much in here. For blue, I wanted to indicate moments that I felt uncomfortable. Largely, these were sex scenes involving our adult male teacher and the underage girl that just made me cringe and made me uncomfortable. The point of this book is to make you uncomfortable. If you're easily triggered, this may not be the right book for you. Orange indicated moments where Vanessa had a sense of clarity and also just that little voice in her head telling her that this wasn't right. I think that's something that I really took from this book and why I would want other people to read it, because it really highlights that we need to pay attention to our intuition because it's really trying to tell us something. In the moments indicated by orange, that's when her intuition was trying to tell her she wasn't really comfortable with what was going on. It's very easy to judge Vanessa for being the victim in this circumstance and being weak-willed, easily influenced, all those things. I wanted to challenge myself, so I used yellow tabs to indicate moments where I found Vanessa to be relatable. I think that we are very much more susceptible than we may think to these types of psychological games. And so I wanted to highlight some of those moments in yellow throughout the book where I could either see myself in Vanessa or I could totally see where she was coming from. Now I want to get into a little bit more specifics. I'm not gonna spoil the plot of this book or anything like that, but again, if you like to go into books blind, then maybe come back to this video after. I went into this book thinking for sure there had to be daddy issues. I imagined Vanessa coming from a broken home, having an absent father, something like that. I was really surprised to see that she came from a very loving home with two parents, married, who loved each other and loved her. I don't agree that she's an unreliable narrator, but I do think she was unlikable through the duration of this book. It made my feelings very complex. Unquestionably, Vanessa is the victim of the story, even though she herself doesn't think she's a victim and doesn't think that she was abused. Jacob Strain particularly picked her out because she was a disturbed girl. Firstly, I mentioned she is very much an outcast, doesn't have any friends. She is wildly insecure, which makes her the perfect target for him. Vanessa doesn't think she's a victim because she claims that she gave consent, that she wanted him, that she wanted this relationship. But truly, she only wanted it because he put the ideas into her head. She was only trying to go to school. She wasn't asking for any of this stuff that happened. There were some reviews that mentioned this situation of abuse romanticized the age gap and the student-teacher aspect. I very much disagree. I don't even think Vanessa liked Jacob Strain a lot of the time, and I definitely don't think she was attracted to him. I think that she had a mental disorder, and I'm not qualified to identify which one, but she had a very obsessive personality. We saw this before she even met Jacob Strain because she had this weird obsession with her roommate from the prior year and they had a major falling out. It sounds pretty ridiculous that a falling out with a friend can cause so much trauma, but for her, it really did. When Vanessa started getting attention from Strain, she was really honored. She felt special, and he reiterated that time and time again. You're special, you're special, you're different than other girls. And that's really what got to her. She wanted to be special. So that was how he groomed her. Now that she's feeling special, her obsession kicks in and she goes by his house and watches him bring in groceries and watches him through the window, which is extraordinarily creepy, but it just shows how obsessive she is. He gives her a copy of Lolita, which in itself is creepy AF. That book is about an age gap romance. Heavy on the romance, it makes it seem okay. Another way in which he groomed her, totally gross. Vanessa became obsessed with Lolita. She read it over and over and over. She talked about it all the time. She even drove Strain crazy because she was obsessed and talking about it all the time. She was obsessed with this idea of romanticizing the age gap. It wasn't that she loved Jacob Strain. She was just obsessed with the idea of this romance. There are several moments in the book I indicated with orange tabs where Vanessa has moments of clarity or her intuition is trying to signal things to her. And largely at these points, I feel Vanessa truly wasn't into Jacob. She wasn't okay with what was happening. It was him forcing himself on her, and she is trying to tell him she doesn't want to do this, and he goes ahead and does it anyway. So I don't think this romanticizes this relationship. I think that Vanessa was just obsessed. She was obsessed with the idea of being special. She was obsessed with him calling her a great writer, with him telling her she was strong, with him giving her all these compliments. That's what she was obsessed about. She wasn't truly in love with him, I feel. Another example why I don't think this romanticizes the situation and why I think Vanessa wasn't truly in love with Jacob Strain is that she disassociates whenever they're physical. So when they are getting into it, she leaves her body and she just kind of lies there and her mind goes somewhere else. She's not thinking about him. She's not in this situation. She just leaves. It's interesting how she could miss him so much when he's away and she's so obsessed with him and seeing him again. And yet when she's with him, she's not enjoying her time with him. As Vanessa grows up, I find it very interesting how her emotional growth was almost stunted to the time of this abuse. She falls into drinking and drugs, and she doesn't take care of herself. She doesn't have healthy relationships, either romantically or with her mom. She's still kind of a bitch to her mom. She's at an entry-level job and she doesn't really do much with herself. So this is something that really defined her life from the ages of 15 to 32. I really wonder if her deterioration into a quick-tempered, unfocused, uncaring adult was really a result of this abuse, or if she was always destined to be this way. Because like I said, she was already pretty messed up before this relationship even started. At first, I was really thinking that Jacob Strain was just a very sick individual who felt like he truly fell in love with Vanessa at 15. As the book progresses though, we see examples how he twists the truth to make it seem like Vanessa came on to him. And that really makes me feel like he is the villain in this story and that what he was doing is intentional. There's no denying that he is pretty sick and twisted though. But then again, so is Vanessa. I mentioned how obsessive she was. And so I think those two personality traits or those two sicknesses were the perfect storm for this awful situation. I think this book is incredibly important because I had no idea what grooming really meant and how it distorts the vision and the true meaning of consent. It was disturbing to see how many adults and fellow students suspected that something was going on, but I really don't think they did enough to stop it. I think that is also a very valuable takeaway in this book. I very much recommend this book, but you need to have the right expectations. You need to be in the right headspace. Hopefully, in sharing my thoughts through this video, that helps you determine if this is the right time for you to read this and if this is the right book for you to check out. I can promise you that you will be uncomfortable reading this. But I can also promise you that this is going to make you think and really give you insight into how these things can happen. I also have more of an awareness of the authors that the publishers are pushing on us, understanding that they might be pushing stories of white authors on me, and I want to hear the stories of all people. So I need to pay attention to what's being advertised to me so I can be more aware and hear everyone's stories. If you're still watching, please drop the butterfly emoji in the comments down below and tell me if you've ever read My Dark Vanessa, if you have any interest of reading it, if you have any hesitations of reading it, because I would love to have a discussion on this very difficult and yet very rewarding book. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.